Heroes. Don't let them die in vain. Start your Heroes SD War collection June 6th, only at SDBullion.com. Tune in this weekend for a special Metals and Markets with Ron Paul, as well as an exclusive interview with Eric Sprott and the second interview with Jim Willie, which features the most shocking claim the Golden Jackass has ever made in his illustrious market forecasting career. This is the Doc with SilverDoctors.com. Joining us today is one of the most popular guests on the show, Jim Willie, editor of the Hat Trick Letter, found on GoldenJackass.com. It's great to have you back, Jim.
Oh, it's good to be back, John. It's always interesting, and there's so much to discuss. It's more like a matter of which of these 18 topics can we select 4 from to discuss. There's just too much material anymore.
Yeah, particularly with you, Jim, you're never lost for words. So we'll get right into it. Well, let's start out here with the topic of the Eurasian trade zone that you've been bringing to the forefront here. There's it's coming together on some energy deals, pipeline construction, as well as this protocol. So let's get right into it with the Eurasian trade zone.
Okay, I believe these energy pipelines are going to serve 2 very important functions. The skeletal system, well, it's more like a circulatory system for blood flow, energy flow. But it's the skeleton of pipes in which energy will flow. But here's the other side to that. The consequence is the nations that are supplied are really corralled. They're kind of a captured zone dependent on Russian energy. And it's really far more than Russian energy. A quick check on industrial metals, and I don't care if you're talking about tin, aluminum, copper, strontium, cobalt. It doesn't matter. They're in the top 3 in global supply. So, the American U.S. government, they're talking about isolating Russia, which is just incredibly stupid. It's about as stupid as having a trade zone with the Pacific that excludes China, which is another of their stupidities. But we got these long-term trade deals, long-term energy deals, and I find that there's too much emphasis, too much payment systems. Well, this is a 30-year payment, a 30-year contract. This is a $400 billion deal. 3 years from now, what will the dollar even look like? 5 years from now, will there be introduced some gold-backed currencies? 6 months from now, will there be a COMEX gold contract? So they're not committed to price and currency in this big Russia and China Holy Grail deal. They're committed to a process, and I think that's really important. The greatest success that they've had regarding the Eurasian trade zone is the growing list of BRICS associate nations. They're being called that, too. It's They're not part of the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa five-way group. It's Indonesia, it's Iran, it's Vietnam, Argentina that are signing up and saying we want to be part of this because it looks like it's the future. And what I find very interesting is that they talk a lot about the Chinese yuan and the Russian ruble being the primary contract terms, the vehicles for payment. Again, the old payment issue. But you look at some of the fine print, say, for a deal that's going to take place just in the next 6 months for an extension, like into western China from central Siberia. They've got all these different plans. If you look at some of the contract stipulations, you'll see yuan and ruble mentioned, but when it comes down to actually payment, they're going to be dumping treasury bonds. They're going to be dumping U.S. treasuries. So what's really curious about this is it doesn't matter what the contract is going to say. There's going to be a gigantic open door for indirect exchange, as they call it, the dumping of treasuries, the usage of reserve treasury currency assets to pay the bill. So the pipelines for Gazprom and for Rosneft, the gas and the oil giants of Russia, they're going to be paid for with treasury bonds. There are a number of other really important aspects to this trade zone. It has to do with what I call protocols. It's going to be uniform kind of inspections. It's going to be, you're on an approved company list. You've got no violations in the last several months. So we're going to do a minimal inspection, and you're going to be moving product along. It's going to be standards like for electricity. I noticed when I came to Costa Rica, I was wondering, will my alarm clock that I brought along, will it work in a plug? Do they have adapters in plug? Is it a 120 line? Or what about, how do they do dryers? The electricity items in your kitchen, dryers and refrigerator. Okay, they want standards for electricity. And not only that, they want standards for the computers. I mean, USB ports. I mean, all these different things. It used to be some other tricky things with cards that insert into computers, but now they're not quite as popular as they were, say, 5 or 8 years ago. Everything seems to be going into standard, multi-prong or the USB. I'm not a real big fan on USB. It's got its limitations, but I'm noticing that when you buy, say, an 8 gigabyte little flash drive to stick in your side, it's moving a lot faster than it was a few years ago with the other devices that had a max of, say, 1 gig. Okay, so you've got, I think, a very strange twist in progress. You're starting to see it right now. You're starting to see it with respect to London. It's what I call the big risk, where you cannot piss off China regarding, say, bond trade and, say, conversion of currency. A nation in Western Europe cannot piss off China without running the risk of being cut off with Russian energy. So again, how do you isolate Russia if they're joined at the hip with China? You can't. So you can't piss off and anger China and say, oh, we're not going to honor your bonds. No, they want anger. Doing so, they're going to be signing up for the Russian Gazprom business, the pipeline. I mean, why did Britain cut off their support for Syria suddenly, a month into the war in Syria? They got a phone call from the Kremlin and Gazprom. They said, look, you want to get cut off of your gas, continue in this direction, you idiots. So suddenly Cameron announced no more support. Since when does the UK not support the U.S. military? Since Gazprom became a client. Oh, my God, not a vendor, a supplier. So next, you're going to see, and this is going to be a real big surprise to the London boys. They have had, for the longest time, along with Hong Kong and Asia, pretty much a monopoly in the financial center. It's not going to be in effect as much anymore because Frankfurt, Germany, is coming to the fore. Watch a lot of interesting little effects take place where, well, for instance, Russia has a Ukrainian finance deal. And the contract was done under London law and done in an issuance confirmed and underwritten in London. Okay, well, a Russian supply of credit to Ukraine took place in London under London jurisdiction. Are you going to continue? So very high-level finance deals. But when it comes to corporation, or a state-run Chinese corp, or a state-run Russian corp doing business with Germany, it's going to be done in Frankfurt. I've been told by a very strong source who's got very good, reliable, long-standing German connections that Frankfurt's going to become the financial hub for all of Europe and Asia and their big deals pertaining to the Eurasian trade zone. Right now you're seeing some obstructions for the workaround new, Gazprom, they realize they're vulnerable with the choke point in Ukraine. So for the last 5 years, they've been working on the Nord Stream, I think they call it Nord Stream, which goes to the north and the Arctic, and just below the Arctic and the frozen waters of northern Germany. And Germany's got a couple of different LNG hubs, liquefied natural gas. It's for Gazprom. The German engineering is part of the Gazprom business. They got the Nord Stream done, but they don't have the South Stream done. It's supposed to be online next year. And now you're seeing the U.S. get in the way and forcing nation after nation to drag their feet on getting all the final charters and agreements and, transit fees and royalties. And I don't think Gazprom's going to take it lightly. I think they're going to say, look, you screw around with the South Stream, we're just going to cut off Italy for a week. And see how you like it. Let's do a little test run for cutoffs. I think that's the sort of thing that's going to come.
And that would change some opinions pretty quickly.
Oh, they'll react instantly. And I've been saying Italy is an example. Why? Well, because they're in line for the South Stream and the southern supply that goes through Greece. But Italy doesn't take anything lightly. They get very emotional and they start exploding on the streets and they start yelling with their hands and all kinds of weird things.
Right.
But I think Poland might be an example, John, because that's where a lot of the staging grounds are for the U.S. and European NATO mercenaries, the hooded mass killers that the U.S. is not so much hired, but U.S. has on a regular and frequent basis for on-call work. the old BlackRock folks.
Right. Well, Jim, I'd like to get in here into a story we've been covering over the last month or two, the big Belgium purchase of U.S. Treasury bonds, which is obviously money laundering for the Fed through Euroclear. But I'd particularly like to get a little bit deeper into your theory in your recent big article with last week's hat trick letter on the Belgian bulge of U.S. Treasury bonds, and your theory that it may be indicative of massive gold sourcing. So let's talk a little bit more about that, Jim.
Okay, well, in this global monetary war, which the propagandists like to call the global financial crisis, the crisis continues. We're into our sixth year. No, it's a global financial war that will not end because they're not even working towards solutions. The first solution is liquidate the big banks, get off the dollar, the toxic dollar. No, we're stuck on 0% and unsterilized bond monetization, QE. So, okay, obviously in this monetary war, Russia does not want to openly declare war. So they use proxies and dump a bunch of treasury bonds on Euroclear, which has its center in Belgium. And Belgium and their central bank decide, well, let's just play along with the Americans. We can earn some brownie points here. We can just call that Belgian Central Bank account holdings. What a bunch of nonsense. Obviously, the drops in the Russian account, not exactly, but they work in the same direction and with powerful volume. The drops for Russia match. It doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure, well, this looks like Russia's using a hidey hole in Belgium. Okay, that's the easy explanation. I don't deal much in easy explanations because that might be what they want us to think in New York and London. Okay, let them latch onto that because it's something we can live with, says London and New York, Wall Street. But it's not really the major factor. What else is going on? Well, I've come to learn, this is from a new London source who's a subscriber, and I call him London Paul. Nice fellow, very bright fellow. For instance, he's got some clients who are setting up shop in the Shanghai Free Trade Zone, and they are diverse. Some of them are Iranians. There are going to be a lot of Arab players in there. But he pointed out that there's another factor with the Euroclear and the Belgian account, and that is pigs nations. Talking about Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Greece, and Spain. They're coming up against restrictions for funds movement. They might not find it so easy, he claims, to abide by Basel III rules for shifting funds around, so they moved it out of in these five nations and put it in Belgium so that it's like a big pillbox, a big warehouse outside their borders. It's not subject to the Basel restrictions. That's a very interesting factor that might explain, who knows, a quarter or say 20% of the nearly $400 billion sitting in the Belgian bulge, what I call the billboard. But let's just get real for a minute. Is J.P. Morgan an expert with the Exchange Stabilization Fund and their chief investment office? Are they not experts in hiding their tracks? So why would they use this big Belgian bulge billboard if they're experts in hiding things? Why wouldn't they say, hey, wait, we don't want it to show up in the Euroclear. Let's move that into the Exchange Stabilization Fund, set up some Forex derivatives, and quickly conceal it before anybody notices. So I'm concluding, and this is basically the baby of one of my strong inner circle sources. I call him Euroraj in my work. He's got very strong roots and background in India, Turkey, and Iran, which is a real important triangle in this coming and even with the workarounds for the sanctions, So he's an expert in that. He says, look, this is not so complicated. We're seeing a large sovereign, meaning a nation, not so much a royal family sovereign. But it could be, like, if it's Saudi, it's a sovereign because they're one and the same. They're a monarchy. We're seeing some large sovereigns, not one country, moving together, protecting a giant sourcing contract, like a group of a whole basket full of gold futures contracts. We're seeing them work together. And they might have contracts with the COMEX and LBMA. It could be, to some smaller extent, contracts linked to the GLD, like contracts that allow them to convert their shares into gold. He suspects that it's among these nations, Russia, China, India, Saudi Arabia, Japan, and possibly Iran. Now, all these nations have significant treasury bond holdings. All these nations have motivation to work toward a dollar alternative. All these nations are working toward, say, gold-backed currencies and the gold trade settlement. All to the BRICS Development Fund, which I think is a misnomer. I think the BRICS Development Fund is a Trojan horse to put out there and eventually become the BRICS Gold Central Bank. So, if you've got a margin call working against this big position with the sovereigns, and let's just say it's 3 or more countries, to source a lot of gold, like well over 1,000 tons of gold, and you got a margin call, what do? Well, they don't say, all right, let's let it wash out, we lost our money. No, they've got reserves. They got them in the form of treasury bonds. So they post treasury bonds on an additional basis every stinking month. There's another side to this. It could be what they're doing is every month they're increasing the size of their contract, apart from any margin call factor. So, this has the look, feel, smell, and earmarks of a gigantic BRICS Gold Central Bank sourcing. Now, let's get into some of the napkin math. And I got to admit, it's kind of funny. Here I got a PhD in statistics, and I missed a zero. I don't mind making mistakes once in a while. I'm a human. Last I checked, I was human. I put on my pants one at a time. Sometimes I put them on 2 legs at a time. But I get it. $1 billion sources 25 tons of gold. So if you've got, just say round numbers for the Belgian Bulge on their billboard. For round figures, let's say we got $400 billion. Well, 400 times 25 is 10,000 tons. In my article, I said it's 1,000 tons. Okay, I missed a zero. Okay, shoot me. Whatever. So it's a bigger argument than what I presented. Now, I put in the article that, add in the factor of leverage from futures contracts, which are, I think there's something like 25 to 1. We could be talking about a maximum of 250,000 tons. All right, we're not really going to go there. So let's just say that a good part, perhaps, of the 10,000 tons of gold that $400 billion worth buys, a good part of the 10,000 tons might be devoted to the Gold Central Bank for the BRICS. And in addition, there might be some leverage. So we might be talking about a fraction of the 10,000 multiplied by some leverage. I think we're talking about something on the order of 10, 15, or 20,000 tons of gold that's being lined up for sourcing. Now let's get practical. If you know any gold brokers and major traders, and if you were to sample, say, 20 analysts in the gold, I know one. I keep hearing from him. It's the voice. I keep hearing from him. Gold in this quantity is difficult to source. You need time, you need channels, you need connections, and you might even need coercion. Wow, okay. That sounds like it's pretty complicated and, hardball, as we like to say. So there's a lot of angles there. I'd like to mention something. Okay, Clearstream is another. It's a competitor. It's a clearinghouse. We know about Euroclear. Why do they have the word clear in there? Well, it's a clearinghouse. Euroclear is located in Belgium. Well, there's another one in the Deutsche Börse, the German financial system. It's called Clearstream. Well, my guess is that Deutsche Bank still has some old pieces lying around, left around, still in operation, still in the midst of cleanup. But my guess is that Clearstream might have some additional sources. Remember, Russia and Germany have really close ties with 3,000 companies from Germany doing business in Russia. So if Russia wants to do some hidden sourcing, they might use Germany. If China wants to do some hidden sourcing, they might want to be a little more in their face and use Belgium with the Euroclear.
And just to, Jim, just to substantiate a little bit what you're saying about they may need to use a little bit of coercion, we just had the news that broke yesterday that Ecuador has agreed to give up over half of their gold reserves. I think it was somewhere around 466,000 ounces to the boys at Goldman for 3 years. And I think we both agree they're not likely to see an ounce of that back in 3 years.
Well, I don't think they will. What that points out is some extreme liquidity problems in that Latin American nation, and I don't give them any credit for intelligence. Well, let me put as a last point on this Belgian bulge, we could be seeing at the same time, in addition to everything that I mentioned previously, we might be seeing the IMF with its pledges, the currency pledges. They might involve quite a few gold pledges. We might be seeing a conversion of the now what I call defunct IMF with their pledges being converted into gold so that these BRICS nations can devote their pledges and convert them through the collateral, through the pledges, into gold for the BRICS central bank. So it's like a multi-channel destination for the BRICS gold central bank. I don't think the IMF super sovereign gold and silver, I don't think that's going anywhere. I don't think they're going to get any pledges. You think Russia's going to pledge some gold toward that? I don't think so. Last I checked, they were in sanctions. I don't think China's going to pledge anything for gold. I think they're going to continue with their current path, and if anything, we're starting to see